Hi everybody, how you doing? This is just a quick overview of how to get yourself associated with Gimp Shop and the look and the feel of it, and maybe change a few preferences while you're at it. Understand how to save and open a file, and explore what you see in front of you. So Gimp Shop usually, after you install, kind of appears in a sort of a split screen mode, where you have three sections of it. On the left over here, we have basically our toolbar. When I click on a tool, if you notice down below, the options for the tool change. So as I go through each tool, different options appear. And this is generally the nuts and bolts here that we're going to be using to manipulate our images in the middle. The middle is basically the canvas. You can call it a number of places, but it's the workspace, the desktop, um, where you're going to open your image and you're going to do things to it with tools over here. We'll get back to tools and why there are tools underneath tools in a second. Over here, your third is a kind of a dock, palette dock, I like to call it, where I have a number of different options here. Down below, I have this one on layers. As I'm going to be using layers, this will be very useful to have the bottom half of this dock set up that way. At the top, though, I have a number of different options. If I click on them, I can go through them and see that I have a number of different options here. To add or remove an option, basically I just removed one by pulling it off, as you can see, with the undo history. This is the gradient tool here, which allows me to see all kinds of different options here for gradients. When I click on them, I can manipulate them, etc., add them to my image. Over here, I have just a history. This is font, patterns, brushes. So if I want to add one, I come over here to configure this tab, click on it, and say add a tab. Under add a tab, I have a number of options, and I'd say your most important one, I believe, is undo history. And I'm going to re-add it for you so you can see everything I manipulate on an image inside the canvas records over here on the undo history. So if I make a mistake after 16 different tools are used, and I'm way down my list, I can go back up and actually click on the space I actually made the mistake, or just before it, and start from that point and not lose all of my work. So the idea there is I can go back in time and change my mistake anytime I want. So that's a very useful one, I would add. Generally, adding a tab is up to you. Once you understand what these do, you can change, manipulate, remove, etc. Detach a tab is how you'd remove one, by the way, and just go through it that way. So I can, once I understand these, I can add more if I wish. I can remove some if I wish, and we go from there. Layers we'll get into in a further tutorial, but that's usually generally the gist of it. When you're doing an image manipulation, you're adding pieces, they become stacked layers on top of that image. So layers are really, really useful. Layer masks are really useful in here, and you'll generally get a look and feel for how that works and how much you use it as you go. But I would suggest leaving that kind of locked in position here. So the middle, you can see along the top, we have a number of different menus, drop-down menus here. These deal with a whole range of things, but first, the most important one is if you do not like the three-panel look, all split up like this with a canvas in the middle, just come down to Windows here, your Windows tab, and scroll down to single window mode and click on it. That'll join them all together and make one big user interface, that you can use, and your canvas is quite large. You can still adjust these side menus here by clicking on the handle and dragging it over to do the spacing. So I'm going to squish mine a little bit more actually to give my canvas more room. And the same with this side. I'm going to squish that in a little bit more too. So to maximize my canvas size. Now, second, I'm not sure I like the look and the feel of it yet. So under Edit, I'm going to come down to Preferences. And when I click on Preferences, I'm getting an option menu to basically design the look, the feel, the theme, the dark, the light, the tools, the way they display within Gimp Shop. So as I come down here, basically I'm looking at interface. These are probably the more common ones that people use. If I go down to theme under interface, I have dark, I have gray, I have light, I have system. So I'm probably going to stick with dark because I do like the dark contrast. And when I come under icon, just below that, I get choices here. Right now it's on symbolic, meaning my icons appear this color in this fashion. I'm going to say legacy. Legacy will put them in color and also more of a classic Gimp Shop look and feel. And if you notice the eraser and the paintbrush and stuff, it looks a little bit more like Photoshop would as well. So I like to use legacy. Under toolbox, another one that people usually use or generally use is I do like to have my tooltip on for each tool, but I like to see them all. As you can see, when I look at a tool, I can see that there are also in group underneath. And basically, that says that there are tools underneath. That little arrow in the bottom corner of that tool, as you can see, the little white arrow, if I hold my button down, I get to see the tools underneath and select them. I like to see all my tools out front, so I'm going to say don't use tool groups. So right here, use tool groups is selected. I'm going to unclick that, which puts all my tools out here. And then when I hover over, I can see and get my tooltip for each one. If you notice as well, in the tooltip bar, it says rectangular select tool here. It says select a rectangular region. So it describes the tool, but it also gives me a single letter shortcut. So if I hit R on my keyboard, I will select this tool, basically. So it gives you a shortcut built right in and a description of the tool. So I find spreading my tools out this way and hovering over them gives me a really nice way, especially if I'm a beginner, to know what each tool does, what each tool is, and get familiar with the shortcut. Also, the color legacy differentiates the tools, makes them easier for me to see, understand that they're different, etc. If I go back to icon theme though, just to give you an idea of what color does, it even distinguishes them further. So the idea there is, you choose which one you like, which one makes sense to you, and keep it that way and hit OK. The last part of this tutorial for you guys to explore, if you wish, is to know the difference between saving and exporting. In Gimp Shop, it's a little weird. When you save, it saves a project file. And I suppose the same as Photoshop, where you automatically get a default file called PSD. PSD is basically the project file of Photoshop. Gimp Shop has its own. So when I open, let's say I'm going to open just open something I was recently working on here. Wasn't actually working on, just using it as an example. A little bit of product placement for my school board. I'm going to come down here, pretend I've manipulated this or changed it, and I'm ready to save it. So if I hit save as for the first time, because I have to title this, I would basically be saving an XCF file. An XCF file is Gimp Shop's version of a project file. It means that I can save it, and when I go back in another time or later time, it basically pauses my work. And when I come back in, everything is still there, as it were, and I can continue my project. Now, if I do not want to save a project file and I'm ready to be finished what I was working on, I would, instead of save, I would actually come down and I would export. So I've already exported this once, as you can see, so I'm going to say export as, but same idea. It allows me to export. It allows me to, this one says JPEG. I can change that to PNG, choose different file types, basically save it as whatever I wish and wherever I wish, and export the file. And the idea then is that it is now ready for distribution or whatever its purpose was in the first place. So file, save as is project. And then basically you would see export here. If I said export, it would give me an option to export as JPEG. Right now it's an export as a PNG. But the idea is export is finished, save is workbook. And those are two important distinctions. So if you were doing this for a project, for something for school or for a customer, you would like to export eventually when you're finished and change it to I prefer PNG. I think it's less integrity loss of the image than JPEG, but lots of people use different formats. So that is basically the nuts and bolts of kind of getting familiar with Gimp Shop. So spend a little time in here, explore, look through some of these menus. Filters are basically the same as Photoshop ever was. You've got a ton of different things you can do, just like you could in Photoshop. Tools, it's very similar. These are all your tools from the toolbar in a menu instead. Colors, same idea. You have hue and saturation layers, all kinds of stuff here: exposure, shadows, highlights, brights, contrast levels, curves, just like Photoshop. Under layers, I can do all kinds of stuff: stack, mask, transparency, transform. Good things to explore. So open an image, get your courage, and try some things out. Change your preferences, change your theme, set it up the way you like, and enjoy.